All right. Hello, everyone. I'm sorry you have to bear with my chorus voice for a little bit. Today we have on stage a set of interesting contributors from different ecosystems, primarily focused on application ecosystem, as well as our base layer protocol, our researchers from the EF. I feel like maybe someone else moderates better.
You want to moderate this? Hi, welcome everybody. I also have a coarse voice, but maybe it sounds better because it's like deeper, whereas normally my voice is much higher. So it's kind of sensual. All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to this panel. Thank you, Tina, for bringing us all together. We had some EFers, we had some application layer people. Why don't we go down the line and introduce ourselves?
Sure, hey. I'm Ansgar, I'm a researcher at the Ethereum Foundation. I've been doing a bunch of different things, most recently looking both into the kind of the staking economics and the overall staking system for Ethereum, but then also worked on roll call, which is an attempt of basically trying to coordinate EVM-based layer 2s and give them help in moving beyond the base layer EVM.
Yeah, I'm Vitalik, also at the Ethereum Foundation, also researching a bunch of things.
Well, hi, my name is Easy, and I'm from co-founder CTO of Math Network. We work on we're on consortium in general, from like front-end application to protocols to infrastructures. So yeah.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Matt, co-founder of Caldera. We are a rollups as a service platform. We help a lot of people launch customized L2s and L3s. Today I'm up here to represent some of the gaming projects that we work with, including ApeChain.
Hi, my name is Makoto. I'm from ENS, Ethereum Name Service. We have recently announced the plan for ENS v2, which core of the part is moving core parts into layer 2. So I'm excited to join here to learn and what's the best way.
Hi, I'm Ken. I do research at the Uniswap Foundation. Uniswap swaps things. Cool, fun. Do we dive in?
Yeah, so maybe just to spice it up a little bit. So for all of the application ecosystem, or if you consider yourself part of that ecosystem, what's the usage of your ecosystem? You can choose your favorite metrics. Let's go. And who are your primary users?
Cool. Let's start backwards. Primary users. So Uniswap is cool, right? Because Uniswap technically it can be for anyone. Uniswap is about access and sort of the ability for everyone around the world to be able to have liquidity, to swap with each other, and to use any tokens and kind of do with it what you want. And so with Uniswap v4, I think like one thing that sort of shifts the framing here is like instead of thinking about Uniswap as a product and thinking about how we swap with each other, how we make LPs more profitable, Uniswap thinks more about, with v4, you think more about order flow as the product, right? How do you actually use liquidity as a way to change the way you're thinking about order flow, right? What is the order flow that you're doing? And how you're actually expanding kind of the scope of what that is. So for us, I guess, as v4 sort of expands with more hooks and sort of more integrations, we're not really thinking of users as just like a retail user who's just swapping ETH USDC, but really thinking about everyone else who wants to do new things on Uniswap, right? It's more of what if your LP was like a margin call, right? What if you actually have KYC pools for real world assets? This is a fundamentally different net new market we're bringing access to for anyone in the world.
Okay, yeah, so ENS is probably one of the oldest running dApps. We launched in 2017, May the 4th. Yeah, May 4th is the way to remember. And yeah, so the usage number, one of the great things about dApps and smart contract is everything on chain. So I just look into geoanalytics, and currently we have over 2 million active names. One of the point is like our name will expire if you don't renew. So in total, we had more registrations, but for the active ones, 2 million. And I think we have about 800,000 unique addresses which point to ENS name. That's on-chain metrics. We also have some sort of things called off-chain resolver, which allows you to basically doing anything on layer 1 is very expensive nowadays. So one of the kind of layer 2 strategies, we introduced something called off-chain resolver, which allows you to store the data not just on-chain, but anywhere. So it could be layer 2, it could be off-chain. So perfect example, I think Uni have uni.is, and you issue subnames to, I think, 100,000 users, and also cb.id, Coinbase. I think they have like several million users, but they are currently storing on, I think, their database. So we don't have the on-chain metrics, but over a million is something we've had.
Yeah, because I'm kind of here representing like the conglomerate of like gaming projects in our ecosystem, I don't have a lot of the metrics offhand. But one of the things I will say is that when we work with gaming projects, they're often interested in all sorts of different types of users, right? So there's like the kind of highly crypto-native on-chain users, but there's also a bunch. Maybe there are some users who interact on-chain, but they're only really there to like hold, buy, and sell NFTs. And then there are a bunch of other users who, may or may not even know that they're using, a project that interfaces with the blockchain.
So we're doing social, and then we consider everybody as our users if you're doing really like behaving in society. And then, so we started from a browser extension that allows users to send encrypted messages on like major social platforms like Facebook and Twitter, because like we thought like these Web2 social players are just like abusing our data and abusing our privacy, so we want to like make something to fight against them. So we started from a browser extension, and then we brought in a lot of users onto this like encrypted web or encrypted social, and then we just like connect with like Ethereum and then connect with the blockchain so that these users are also able to directly interact with like smart contracts or any like on-chain assets directly within their like timeline on Twitter and Facebook. So it's more like enhanced timeline for users to better behave on like on-chain world. And on our best estimation of like total number of users is within like 100K who have ever downloaded our extension. But we are also doing a lot of like Web3 and Web2 identity aggregation, and we have like at least 500 to 700K. I can't remember clearly, but bindings between like a Web2 identity to a Web3 identity, which is like a double sword. I would say a double-edged sword, because like on one hand you can get really great like information regarding some like Web2 and the Web3 user connections, but on the other hand it's like a huge privacy issue here, because like you can easily be social engineered through this information. So we are trying to find a way to fight against this, or find the balance, or find the trade-off between convenience and privacy, or like secure social world. Okay, that will be all for my answer.
Yeah, I mean, I guess users of Ethereum include, definitely still a lot of direct users, a lot of layer 2 protocols, and some applications. So it probably ends up being a mix of all three. Like obviously, originally Ethereum was kind of 100% just like people building applications like directly on top of it and doing everything there. But then like over time, more and more has been starting to happen through the layer 2 ecosystem. But I think like base layers definitely have like a much more low-level relationship to stuff that happens on the user layer, right? It's kind of like, if you're like C++, like it's hard to design C++ in ways that's opinionated on issues of like, like privacy, for example, right? But I don't think blockchains are quite as low level as C++, but I think they're, like somewhat more in that direction relative to some of the like closer to user stuff that other people are working on. Though like I do personally think about closer to user stuff as well.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much covering it. I think basically, well, with the modular approach of Ethereum, right now, basically you can think of Ethereum as the ecosystem, and then our users are hopefully like a lot, basically all of the above, basically. Or then you can think of like more narrowly of just the base chain, which basically really just the root of the ecosystem. And then of course, yes, in a like basically the users become in a way more over time more boring because they're mostly just management operations for the higher level actual user activity. So.
Well said. Well, so I have a question for Vitalik again. So in 2013-14, Ethereum white paper characterized it as a next generation smart contract and decentralized application platform. So it seems to have changed maybe.
Oh, I see, because we're now a smart contract and decentralized application platform.
Something like that. So, and also during in the white paper, you laid out a few lovely examples. Why was storage an application?
Yeah, okay, so the whole decentralized storage thing, I feel like that's like one of the like underloved parts of the original vision, right? Basically, a lot of people have needs to store stuff, and I mean, there's different kinds of storage. There's like backup of your hard drive. There's like like hosting, like static web pages. There's like some of everything in between, but there's like there's centralized providers for all of this stuff. But it would be nice if we had decentralized providers. And the nice thing about crypto is that you could have these very direct incentive markets where you just like directly pay people to store stuff for you. And this was something that like I was very excited about as a use case, like back then. And like I mean, I think it definitely does end up being pretty challenging to provide in practice, basically, because like you need like essentially for redundancy, you need data to be stored in multiple places, and then ideally you need some kind of assurance that the different places your data is being stored is like actually kind of like politically independent and not just like architecturally independent, so there's like this big rabbit hole, and then like people like Filecoin ended up like trying to like solve the problem partway for like at least some use cases. I do think that we should like actually go back and try harder to solve some of that stuff, basically because specifically I think like for the use case of storing content for dApps, right? Because okay, like I think for personal files, I mean realistically, like like there's like we literally have like 1 terabyte USB keys. Like I actually saw these like once I was like going to the like one of those like crazy like electronics like stores in Taipei that just like has like some of everything on every floor, and they got like the drones and the cables and everything, right? And like I saw this thing for the first time. It's like a USB key, and it said 1 terabyte on it, and I'm like, whoa. And like that's like basically the only thing like I have that can like that I need to store that can match that are like basically exactly 2 things, right? One is AI models, and the second is blockchains. And for blockchains, like we need to implement like EIP 4444 like yesterday. So big cheers to everyone who's still actually working on doing that. And then like after that, stateless clients and so on. But okay, that's a bit of a digression, but like the point is, like I think the storing your own pictures like use case is less necessary, because like I actually think it's getting easier and easier to just like store all of your own pictures locally. Like if that's what you want. But for dApps, like okay, so I saw like I think what was that dApp that got hacked, like whose website got hacked yesterday? I forget. Was it? It was Compound. No, that was the one, right? And like basically, yeah, you know, like we have this like trust chain that's like much crappier than it needs to be on a whole bunch of ways, right? And what we do need, I think, is like it's time to bring back Mist, right? Like who here remembers Mist? the Ethereum web browser, right? Yeah, so we need to bring back Mist, right? And then inside of Mist, we need to actually let people go to dapname.eth, and then that .eth on ENS you actually have a hash, and then you have an IPFS record, and you actually download the content, and you actually check the content against the hash, and then the ENS thing itself needs to be controlled by some kind of multisig or even some kind of DAO directly, and so you have this actual trust chain that you'd have to follow, so there isn't this one single thing that you can hack and then just immediately and even undetectably start serving people a web page that just grabs all of their all of their assets, right? But the point is that for that to happen, one of the really valuable things to have is to have dApp content storage that is independent of specific servers, and having better infrastructure for that. I don't know. I feel I have to say the full word infrastructure because the word infra is maximum cringe. So the infrastructure to actually do that, right? And then we that actually increases the security of the ecosystem. Yeah.
Speaking of the security of the ecosystem, back in the days when Uniswap first started, the immutability was super important, and things seem to have changed quite a lot. So why has dApps evolved? What has changed over the years? This is a question for Ken.
Well, this is really interesting, and I just a little bit of preface. I've cornered both of these guys about this, but it's this heavy financialization of where we are in DeFi and Ethereum, and there's now a lot of liquidity. There's a lot of money that comes in and out. There's a lot of money that sits on Ethereum, and I think we're afraid to say the words MEV. We don't want to talk about that. But it's such a big thing, right? We are we're so afraid of it being exploitative, and in many ways it is exploitative. But it also it's natural market efficiency that exists with how blockchains are created, or specifically for Ethereum, and it's tough, right? I think when you think about Uniswap users, you think about the retail users who are using app.uniswap.org, who are using Banana Bot, or just Telegram bots in general. And it's tough because the people who are trading on Telegram bots, which is not an insignificant amount of people, it's 12.5%, they're 15% of market share. They're giving their private keys to Telegram bots, being yeah, let me buy insert coin, and just it's really tough for Uniswap to kind of see this happen, get picked off, and the degeneracy keeps going. So I think one of the things that I've been super anxious about is okay, over the last couple of days we've been talking about how liquidity on AMMs is moving off of Ethereum, and I guess if liquidity moves off Ethereum because of MEV, it sort of moves applications or DeFi applications off Ethereum, and I think I know what some people would say. Maybe it's good that dApps move off Ethereum and we move it to L2. But it sort of does lose some of the economic security of what Ethereum kind of upholds. It also, you kind of lose the sort of I guess the ability for people to freely kind of build on Ethereum the same way, right? Because you lose the composability, you lose the interop, or at least you create more friction of actually letting users build on top and use these applications. Again, for Uniswap, we're looking to provide access to everyone, right? And if we move it off Ethereum, move it onto L2s, it's creating more static friction to be able to get started. The onboarding stuff needs to get created, and then the dirty word, the infra, right, with negative incentives. Please don't attack me after this, but the incentives are such so that the infra actually becomes even more fragmented, so the users have even less of an ability to be able to transact on what I think should be freely accessible. But it's tough. I don't know. I'm curious to see how everyone else thinks about it.
I'm curious, what does the big picture guy, Ansgar, think about liquidity moving off chain?
Wow. Well, I mean, moving off chain, we're saying just moving upwards, right? So that does make a difference, and I agree that like if we have to be realistic that today that does come with a hit to interoperability and even security and all these things. But of course, I think that is the bullet we have to bite to get to scalability. Like at this point, kind of blockchain scalability, that's been a topic that's been around for I don't know 10 years or something, and I think we understand the design space pretty well, and you have to make some tough choices. And I think basically we are right now in this process. L1 is just not big enough for everyone to do all the things. Even if we try very hard, it's just not. And so we have to do go through the one-time painful process of making L2 feel basically like L1. And we can totally get there. Like I think we are right now maybe halfway there. And in terms of both user friendliness and interoperability and everything, but then also of course security. But there is a clear path to that. And so if we just if we basically it's like a little bit of a like narrow path where on one hand, of course, we can't ignore all the complaints because those are valid complaints. But at the same time, I think we still have to trust that path is the right path. And I think if we get that right, then the end outcome will be just the same as L1, just much more scalable, basically.
But I guess like it's not. I guess we're not really seeing that, right? Like a lot of research is really pushing us to kind of like get Ethereum to be more creative around how we're dealing with MEV. And so a lot of the research is focused on what I think is actually like more centralizing forces and creates more, more surface area around like how we're capturing for validators, which is not a bad thing. But it also like doesn't stop essentially the problem that we're trying to solve here, which is like if we think MEV is exploitative, like we're creating new mechanisms to kind of move it around, shift in different places, but it still like doesn't change the paradigm of like where like Uniswap is, where the users are, and like the negative externalities that we'd want to like prevent and moving everyone off chain, right? Like I think we're not solving the problem here, and I think it's tough to reconcile with. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, yes and no, but I think. Basically, we have to. The way I think about it is that like just because we have this very modular approach in Ethereum and also this very actual decentralized approach, that basically there are all these different sub problems and there are different people that have or different groups that basically have to solve the different problems. Like I think with MEV, we're seeing this very encouraging trend now of like more and more apps actually being smart about preventing MEV or capturing that themselves or something, basically, so that it never actually hits the protocol level, right? But I personally, for example, like in my own research, I don't think about MEV much at all, right? So like I think we are pretty good at like having compartmentalized different research streams and everything, and I don't think I agree with your criticism that basically there's no progress on. Yeah, I guess it's not. Also, just when you say off chain, like I would not call like if someone moves from L1 to L2, it's not off chain.
Sorry? No.
L2s are not off chain.
Well, so people are not moving to L2s,
up,
right?
Not off.
Well, yeah. I guess the thing is like they're not just moving to L2s; they're actually moving off chain with like private market makers. With a lot of these things, it's not necessarily just to L2s. And I again, like please, no disrespect. I love you guys very deeply, but I definitely am not criticizing research in that direction. I guess my point is just like why can't we have both?
But like last thing, and I don't want to not pinpoint, but just back and forth. But I do think actually there's an important point here that like blockchains in a way like they're magical, but they're also like they're like a very very powerful tool, and like you don't always need the most powerful tool. Basically, like for example, in the very early days, what dApps often did was literally just store everything they needed just into storage, right? And at some point, storage became not free anymore because actual adoption picked up, and then you had to be a little bit smart. Wait, do I really have to put that into storage? Can I just have that be off-chain, indexed, and then I can just like get it because I only need it in the interface anyway. It's not relevant for my trust assumptions, right? And so basically, I think we are in that process where basically we had this magical new tool, and in the beginning we used it in the simplest way possible. And now that we are like getting more and more sophisticated, it really, I think, it's in a way like an art of like using this kind of trust anchor that the L1 is in basically the most lightweight way possible without compromising your trust assumptions. And I think that's not a bad thing. I think that's actually, in a way, like it's a beautiful thing. And I think it is inevitable if you want to really make the most out of the technology. I don't know, Vitalik, do you? I heard some thinking
I'm
noises.
trying to think. Sorry, I just forgot what my point is.
Well, so we actually have quite a few presentations or conversations about this later on. I want to actually turn to the our app and app rollup developers. What are your considerations? What goes through your mind, like when you choose what to do? There's so many choices today. Why do you launch a rollup? And why do you design it the way?
Why do we launch a rollup chain, or we just go to L2? Or both?
Both.
Okay, yeah. So in our case, we just had a ENS conference on Monday where we invited lots of players from like the rollup, the service provider, to the end users. And currently, we are still open-minded. We could go just deploy to existing public layer 2 chain, or we could deploy our own. And actually, some teams, I think Axiom even suggested we should have our own VM, so like custom rollup, not even EVM. So we are kind of exploring from the diverse range. And in our specific use case, one thing unique, I guess ENS is slightly different from all the other L2 use cases, because still most people use it in a context of DeFi where liquidity matters. And quite often when, for example, a fraud-proof based rollup, even though there's a 7 days challenge period, there's ways to work around because it's a fungible token. So whenever you can put the value and the stuff, someone can come and put a collateral, whereas NFT is inherently more difficult. So that, and yeah, that's one thing. And also, in our case, again, most DeFi or any chain, actually base model of the layer 2 is about, most of the case, you just create a copy of what you were doing in L1 on L2. And you just have an exact replica of the same thing everywhere. Whereas in our case, we basically need to cater for every chain, like, for the simple usage of name resolution. So in our case, just copy, making a copy doesn't really help in terms of name resolution. So we actually developed something, our own kind of interoperable protocol called EIP3889, aka CCIP read, almost like 3-4 years ago. And that actually uses layer 1 as the entry point. That most people, because pretty much all the dApps have a connection. If it's EVM compatible, you have a connection to layer 1. And the current nightmare is like whichever the usage, you need to figure out which chain it is, and you have to change network. Our protocol, our framework abstract that, so like you always use L1 as an entry point, but we have a ways to proxy to get the data from other chains. And to do that, we use storage proof of the Ethereum data storage, and also we use ways, mostly like hooking up the existing rollup mechanism that where every rollup tend to store the state root of the entire L2 on L1. So our framework use it to check that, fetch the storage proof and verify on chain. By that nature, we actually need a finality to the L1. So most people, if you have 7 days gap window, there's a way to work around. But in our case, we directly hook into the rollup's core mechanism. So that faster finality, if it's 7 days, if there's a 7 days period, if you set the data on layer 2, you need to wait 7 days, which is almost unusable. So we are really, I think we are the, people sometimes say like faster finality is important, but there's a lot of work around like liquidity or like a pre-confirmation, all that stuff. But we are kind of, our design constraints to really challenge layer 2 to have that fast finality. That's the first thing. And another thing is decentralization and the censorship resistance. That when ENS first launched, it was pre-DAO. So that DAO came in 2021. So when it first came out in 2017, we had a 7 multisig, which had quite a lot of power of like, I think the biggest power was like if 7 people multisig agrees, they could overwrite your name. But from in the very beginning, it was very important because we are not sure how stable our smart contract is. And as time progressed, we gradually actually killed these features to the point that we still have multisig, but this multisig doesn't have much capability to do. But now, when it goes to layer 2, there's still lots of area where it uses like centralized sequencers, or even if there are many players working on centralized sequencers, then if it's ZK chain, what happened to the provers? Can provers be, so there's we start seeing I think the last part our founder Nick Johnson mentioned in our conference is like, we spend so much time to decentralize ourselves, and then we don't want to get back to the square one. So that's security, and the fast finality is our top priority when choosing to whether we pick our own L2 or just deploy to someone else's.
Thank you. That's super thorough. Anything to share on what about the ApeCoin community?
Yeah, so I think ApeCoin's very interesting, where they're trying to do a lot of things to improve both the user and developer experience in kind of like somewhat sort of degen, very creative ways. They're working on native yield, which is of course an increasingly common conversation that we're having since Blast introduced that into the ecosystem. Another thing that we're looking at very closely is the idea of like separate gas markets for different applications. One of the big issues that a lot of teams in the gaming ecosystems face is that they have to constantly hop from like chain to chain to chain, because one chain will get saturated, gas prices will explode, and then they need to move. And so we're investigating kind of two potential approaches here. One of which is dedicated gas markets, or allocating a specific proportion of like the total throughput of the chain to specific applications to make sure that they at least always have kind of like a dedicated lane on the chain that they can use. And another one, which I think is going to be more impactful for long-term scaling of the ecosystem, is this idea of launching multiple different chains within an ecosystem that are all highly interoperable with each other, sort of like, I don't know, like a mini sort of super chain between all of these different chains with really, really strong interop properties that allows assets to move across them really quickly. And that'll allow new teams that enter this ecosystem to rapidly spin up new chains that still feel kind of part of this one community, that don't feel like they're spinning up an entirely new thing. I think in general, when we see a lot of teams that are working on like new rollups, it's always like a bit of a balance between like highly, you can call it creative, you can call it degen protocol development. Like I think one of the really cool things about L2 is that it kind of allows you to do permissionless protocol level innovation. The tricky thing there is like making sure that those things are fundamentally sound, or at least like everything won't go to shit immediately. We work with all sorts of different teams, some of which aren't necessarily super Web3 native, who come to us with like pretty fundamental questions like, why do we even need gas on the chain? And then that opens up all these other conversations around spam protection. What happens if a bunch of developers come on, a bunch of users come on? So it helps us kind of challenge a lot of our initial assumptions. We think generally we can get to like a good spot where we're not too afraid of the thing going up and failing on day one. But there's just like a lot of very interesting innovations happening.
I think just a follow-up question for both ENS and maybe Ape and other communities. What's the decision-making like cycle? Like how early do people start thinking about it? How long how close do you think a decision is even made? Because it's it's a community.
Yeah, in our case, I think we start looking into layer 2 area back in 2020. I think Vitalik wrote a blog post called is it roll-up centric thing? And I think initially that dictates it coming up with our current EIP 368 framework. That was about 3 months period. We had a monthly call, and we invited people from like ZK Sync, Arbitrum, Optimism, and Vitalik came a couple of times. And that was a pre-DAO moment. So like it was very, very small community. It was easy to make a decision. Now, so I'm from ENS Lab, which is a company responsible for launching the initial protocol and the DAO as well. But last November, actually, community presented like, well, actually, like now DAO is there, you need to decentralize the development process as well. So we actually have a so-called service providers that like I think allocated like 2 or 3 million to 7 different players, and there's some will get grants of like 100K to like 700K. So some team is big and some team is small. So they also needs to be involved in the decision-making system. So I think around March, when we have the ISO Global London, there's a lot of committee member came to talk to us, and that kind of actually we were thinking about going to L2, but they also really pushed the boundary of like, or we should really go for like a layer 2. So right after that, we did a series of like a intense session to basically coming up with ENS V2, which published I think back in May. And again, last Monday we just had a meeting, and I made sure that I invite all the service provider. So final decision making will probably become some sort of DAO governance voting, because there are certain things we need to switch the contract. So that needs it. And most of the I think key thing. There's the 2 things. First, it requires all these applications to switch to the new endpoint. That doesn't require DAO governance vote, but like we just have to talk to all the like wallets and the like services to go. That's like kind of, it's not like governance, but then like there are certain contracts to change that require DAO governance. No, we don't have the timeline yet, but probably we don't want to spend like 3 to 5 years. So it should, some sort of the decision will come in hopefully in a year time, I think.
Yeah, I think so. For us, it's honestly been quite similar. Like dealing with very decentralized organizations, it's always like a very unique, interesting challenge / opportunity. Yeah, I think for us, like we've seen the most important thing is to have people in the discussions that represent like all the different interests, including the kind of fundamental interests in the technical soundness of the protocol. But for us, it's really about like making sure, for organizations where like there is a strong token holder community, they feel very heard, they feel understood, and they feel really excited about the direction the protocol is going. Then of course, users and developers in the community also need to feel very excited, feel like they're heard, and also hopefully get their ideas in. And then we also found like it's definitely very, very important to have someone to kind of act as like the face of the idea to the community. Like communicating fundamental protocol upgrades is always very hard. The decision to like move to your own L2 or build an L2 is probably, often case like the most impactful, important architectural decision that like any protocol will ever make. And so it's very, very important that someone who really understands the community can like very easily and strongly communicate the rationale for this and how it'll benefit everybody in the community in order to get everybody on board. Because what you absolutely don't want is any sort of like fragmentation of the community or strong disagreements about the new direction.
Yeah, Issa, you've been quiet. So Mass has some of the coolest products in our decentralized world. Like, why not an L2 already?
Oh, yeah, we're building that now.
Oh,
Thanks
oops.
for mentioning that. But yeah, we haven't announced it, but we're actively researching and then building our own L2 very soon. Yeah, I should have said that, but yeah, it's okay. It's okay. But yeah, I mean, like the reason why we built this like a new L2 just for it's like more like optimizations for social is basically because like we thought it is time. Back in like the days like 4 to 5 years ago, we built like a mask. We just want to build 12 users to have a better experience on the social media, on the major social networks. And then we built a lot of like different toolkits for them so that they can just protect their privacy or have a better enhanced like experience on these like platforms. But now we just like actively think for the users. So our like design model is pretty easy. So we just like we think we need to build something for the users from the user side, not from the developer side, not from the protocol like issuer side. It's more like on users. So we just want to bring. So the sole thing we want to do is like bring more people to blockchain, especially in the social way. So we want to build. For example, gasless transactions for sure, and then we also want to like say, hey, I'm not sure if you guys know like Keybase, but back in 2014, 2015 when they launched Keybase, you can actually send encrypted messages on everyone, every single person, as long as they have a Twitter handle or like have a email address. Basically, just like bringing these people into the game is the most important, one of the most important things to do. And also, we want to allow people to send tokens to anyone you know, maybe your mom, your grandparents. But it's seemingly like quite impossible right now because like you cannot send tokens to some like a non-existent address. So we are building something that we can just like map all the unique identifier on some domain name, and then send the token to that. And then if you can just bring a DKP to prove like you're the owner of that account or that like a domain address, you can just claim and then just transfer the token out. So basically, we just want to build something to allow people to use crypto more easily. And then I think we are running out of time, but I did have a talk in ECC back in, can't remember, 2 days ago, and then I do have the slides for that. So if you guys are interested, I have a detailed a design for that. But basically, yeah, our design model is pretty simple, just built for the users, and make it easier for them to get on board.
That's cool. Well, you're right, we're almost out of time, but before we go out of time, very rapid round of response. Will you become base rollup or not? Let's go.
No comment.
We're thinking about it.
Yeah, also thinking about it.
Okay, DK.
I mean, Ethereum should become a based rollup on top of XRP.
Absolutely.
Okay. Another round of. So I asked each of you to think about three most important asks. I'm gonna ask you to just think of one. So what is the one thing that the base layer can do for your project in the next 3 years?
Love Uniswap more deeply. Like, just give us a little appreciation, a little love. That would be great because it helps all the users.
So what L1 can do, not L2?
L1.
L1. Not really. Well, just be secure, I guess. Yeah. Don't get hacked.
Yeah, that was mine. I would also say let's try to keep DA and settlement as cheap as possible.
Just like store the most important information data on L1, please. Just don't spam it.
Let's see, what should L1 do to better accomplish, I guess, my goals? I mean, I don't know, just minimize the risk that it turns into a centralization dystopia.
Yeah, I think basically be the best possible settlement layer, facilitate basically a maximally secure and scalable layer 2 ecosystem as best as possible.
Cool.
While still being useful by Uniswap directly,
All right, well, thank you so much for great panel.